The day the Veyr Dominion arrived over Earth, every military telescope on the planet caught the same image. 12 black ships crossing the upper atmosphere without slowing down, trailing a single planetary broadcast that ordered humanity to surrender every major city within 30 minutes. The order worked everywhere it landed, everywhere except one small industrial district outside the city of Calder, where a battered municipal police machine had just finished repairing a broken street barrier and refused to move an inch further because someone had parked a delivery truck directly in front of it. The Dominion would later call that machine their single greatest tactical miscalculation. At the time, they simply logged it as equipment and moved on, and that, more than any weapon Earth owned, turned out to be the mistake that ended the war. If you enjoy HFY stories where humanity wins by being stubborn in ways nobody saw coming, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment naming one ordinary Earth machine you think could survive an actual alien invasion. We're a small, growing channel, and every subscriber genuinely gets us closer to our first 1,000. Now let's walk into Calder and find out why the Veyr Dominion spent 3 straight hours trying to convince one traffic cop to go home. Commander Veyr had conquered 43 worlds, not 39, not 42, 43, and he had never once lost a campaign. His fleet had taken agricultural worlds, mining colonies, orbital cities, fortress moons, and once an entire ocean world whose capital sat beneath 4 kilometers of black water. The result was always the same. The local population resisted. The Dominion identified the system the resistance depended on. The Dominion broke that system. The population surrendered. Veyr did not think of this as cruelty. He thought of it as efficiency, and after 600 years of refinement, Veyr military doctrine had been reduced to a single sentence that Veyr had built his entire career on. Every organized resistance depends on a system, so find the system, break the system, and the resistance ends on its own. His flagship, the Veyr's Judgment, carried enough orbital weaponry to disable Earth's major power grids inside 4 minutes. Its scanners could map a communications network straight through a mountain range. Its tactical computers could locate a command center, a logistics hub, a military headquarters, an ammunition depot, and an industrial production facility faster than a human officer could finish saying the word invasion. There was exactly one person on that flagship who did not like the first survey. Lieutenant Sira Ven had been promoted only 6 months earlier, young by Veyr standards, and cursed with a single deeply irritating habit for someone in her position. She read everything. Not the summaries, not the tactical highlights pulled out for the bridge, the full appendices, the civilian infrastructure notes, the emergency services records, the municipal maintenance logs nobody in Fleet Command had opened in years. When the first atmospheric survey of Earth landed on her console, she read it twice, then kept going. "Commander," she said. Veyr did not look up from the main display. "Report. The scan has identified approximately 17,000 autonomous or semi-autonomous machines across the primary invasion zones. Expected. Most of them are civilian. Then they are irrelevant. There's one category I think we should look at more closely." He glanced over, which? "Municipal enforcement machines." "Police," he said, already turning back to the display. "Something like that. Disable their communications." "Already attempted. The network rejected the intrusion." That made him pause. Result. "We don't know why. Our engineers don't either." Veyr's expression didn't change. "Then the network is poorly designed." "That isn't what the engineers concluded." "What did they conclude?" "They don't know that either." He almost smiled. "Lieutenant, uncertainty is not a threat category. Find the systems." Sira lowered her head and logged the order and went back to reading, because she had a growing, uncomfortable suspicion that the thing they were looking for didn't exist in any shape their doctrine had a name for. The first city fell in 8 minutes, the second in 11. The third never got the chance to receive a surrender order at all, because its communications infrastructure had already been quietly isolated before anyone downstairs even understood what was happening. Human governments were confused. Human militaries were overwhelmed. The Veyr fleet was doing exactly what it had done 43 times before, methodically, calmly, and on schedule. Then Veyr's tactical map landed on Calder, and nothing about the schedule held together again. Calder was not a military city. It had no strategic weapons platform, no major air base, no government headquarters, no orbital launch. Capability. It was an old industrial town built around a river basin, factories strung along the western bank, houses climbing the eastern slope, and a wide drainage valley cutting straight through the middle that had flooded badly enough 3 separate times in the last 40 years that everyone who lived there had simply learned to work around it instead of waiting for the city to finally fix it properly. Calder had survived wars, floods, 2 economic collapses, and 3 different governments, and along the way its people had developed a very practical relationship with things that were broken. They repaired them. They kept them running long past the point anyone with money would have replaced them. And when the city's public safety modernization program got canceled 18 years earlier, 3 months after its single deployed unit came online, the machine was not scrapped along with the paperwork the way it should have been. It just kept working, because nobody in the budget office ever got around to filling out the form that would have shut it off. And by the time anyone remembered, it had already fixed too many broken things for too many people to want it gone. His official designation was CR9. Nobody in Calder called him that. Everyone just called him the Warden. At 6:40 that morning, 3 hours before an alien fleet would ask for him back, the Warden was standing beside a municipal street barrier that refused to lower, because a delivery truck had parked directly in front of it and shown no interest in moving. "Move vehicle," the Warden said. The driver leaned out of his window. 2 minutes. That statement was made 6 minutes ago. "I had paperwork." "You still have paperwork." "Exactly." They stared at each other for a long moment, and neither one blinked, which for the Warden was mostly a matter of not having eyelids. "This is a loading zone," he said finally. "I know. You are blocking emergency access." "I know. You are committing a municipal violation." "I know." There was a pause. "Move vehicle." The driver sighed and put the truck in gear. "Fine." That was technically how the single largest military disaster in Veyr history began. Not with a weapon, not with an explosion, with a delivery truck and a barrier that took 9 minutes longer to clear than it should have. The Warden had 18 years of unglamorous, unbroken municipal service behind him, and that turned out to matter more than anything the Dominion had brought down from orbit. He knew Calder the way a person knows a house they've lived in their whole life. He knew which roads flooded first in a hard rain, which buildings still ran on old power conduits nobody had gotten around to replacing, which factories kept compressed gas tanks in the wrong storage sheds, which bridges had developed a vibration fault that made the whole span hum at highway speed, and which neighborhoods lost their signal the moment a real storm rolled through the valley. He knew which drainage tunnels were safe to walk, and which had partially collapsed a decade ago and never been mapped again. And he had learned slowly and the hard way that frightened people lie, not because they are bad, but because they are frightened, and that the correct response to almost any kind of trouble was the same short sentence he said whenever something went wrong. A broken door, a collision, a fire, a fight, a power failure. Let's do this properly. At 7:02, the first Veyr ship crossed into Calder's airspace. The Warden looked up and tracked it with his optics as the city sirens began, and every screen in Calder lit with the same message. Earth civilians, your planet is under Dominion authority. Remain in place. All military and government systems are to be disabled. He turned to the dispatcher on the emergency channel. Are they asking us to remain in place? Apparently. Are they authorized to give that order? No. He considered that for exactly as long as it took to say it. Let's do this properly. The first Veyr landing units came down near the Western Industrial District expecting armed resistance and found firefighters instead. Their armor was rated against directed energy, kinetic rounds, chemical agents, and electromagnetic disruption. Nobody on the design team had ever tested it against a municipal fire hose because nobody had ever needed to. The lead squad marched into an open warehouse, and a firefighter cranked the main valve wide open, and 4,000 liters of pressurized water and industrial foam hit the front rank at once. Nobody was hurt. The armor sealed perfectly, but every external optical sensor in the squad fogged over in the same instant, and their tactical systems, with total and unhelpful sincerity, announced visual obstruction. "Advance," the squad commander shouted, and his men advanced 3 meters, and one of them walked directly into a forklift. The operator looked down at him from the cab. The alien looked back through a foam. "Streaked visor. Move," the alien said. The operator shrugged. "It's a forklift." The commander transmitted a formal threat. The operator pointed, without much urgency, at a sign bolted to the warehouse wall. "Authorized personnel only." Behind him, a second soldier walked straight into a stack of empty shipping pallets and went down hard enough that his squad had to stop and check on him. Sierra watched the footage from orbit with an expression that would have been a wince if her species built expressions that way. "Commander, the resistance isn't centralized." "Correct." "Then identify the local authority coordinating it." "We are doing so." "We haven't found one." Veyr studied the map. "Then they have failed to organize." "That may be the actual problem." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Explain." She pulled up 3 separate feeds side by side: a firefighter defending a warehouse, a bus driver refusing to abandon his route, a hospital administrator quietly rerouting emergency power. None of them had spoken to one another at any point. They're acting independently. "They are resisting." "Yes." "Then the resistance is organized." "No, Commander, it isn't." "Then it is inefficient." "Unless," Sierra said carefully, "the system doesn't actually need coordination to function." Veyr dismissed the idea before it finished landing. Every resistance requires a system. That was mistake number 1, and neither of them would understand it as a mistake for another 2 hours. The Veyr troops believed they had secured the industrial district. At 7:31, they shut down the city's central traffic control system, expecting several thousand vehicles to stop dead in the street. Several thousand vehicles kept moving instead because Calder had been running on unreliable signals for years, and every driver in the city already knew, by long habit, which intersections turned dangerous the moment the lights went dark. People slowed down. A few shouted. One man leaned out of his window at a Veyr checkpoint and yelled that they were supposed to be on the other side of the road. And when a soldier raised his weapon, the man simply drove off, because the soldier's orders were to secure infrastructure, not to shoot confused commuters, and nobody had written a protocol for that particular kind of civilian. "Commander, the traffic network wasn't their primary system," Sierra said. "Then what is?" "We don't know." "Find it." The city kept moving. Mistake number 2. At 7:46, the Dominion discovered the municipal permit office, and what should have been an irrelevant footnote in the invasion timeline became one of the strangest engagements of the entire war. 3 soldiers walked in carrying weapons and found one human woman behind a desk, who looked up from her paperwork without any particular alarm. "Can I help you?" The squad commander stepped forward. "You are ordered to surrender this building." She glanced at the clock. "Do you have a permit?" "For what?" "Military occupation." "This planet has already been conquered." "That's not a permit." "We do not require your permission." "Then you'll want to speak to the district office." He raised his weapon partway. She did not move. "You are threatening a municipal employee." "I'll need your identification number for the incident report," she said, reaching for a form. His translator stumbled over the sentence twice. "You intend to file a report against the Dominion?" "Of course." "To whom?" "The city." "The city has surrendered." "No," she said, not unkindly. "It hasn't." He had no answer for that, and neither did his translation system, so he left, and she went back to her paperwork and filed the report 3 hours later exactly as promised. Sierra found it in the municipal database that evening and read it twice before she understood what she was actually looking at. "Commander, the humans have classified our occupation as an unauthorized municipal activity." Veyr stared at her. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," Sierra admitted. Mistake number 3. The warden's first direct encounter with a Veyr squad came at 8:02, near a power substation they had orders to secure. "Identify yourself," the commander ordered. "Municipal police." "You are military equipment." "No." "You are armed." "Yes." "Then you are a combatant." "No," the warden tapped the badge on his chest. "Police." The alien ran a scan and got no exact match against anything in his database. Your authority is unclear. That's fine. Are you surrendering? No. Are you resisting? The warden gave that one a moment of genuine thought. I'm working. The commander raised his weapon. The warden lifted one hand. Please lower that. You will be destroyed. Let's do this properly. The alien fired. The beam caught him square in the chest. His armor flashed white, and he took one step back and then another before looking down at the small scorch mark now sitting over his badge. That was unnecessary, he said, and the alien fired again. And this time the warden simply moved, not fast, not dramatically, just a single unhurried step behind the concrete housing of the substation. The second shot went wide. The third scarred the wall. He came around the far side carrying a torn-off section of metal access gate as an improvised shield, absorbed the next hit on it, kept walking, and reached the commander while the man was still shouting for his squad to concentrate fire. He took the weapon out of the alien's hands the way a person takes a stick out of a dog's mouth, more patience than force, twisted, and set it down on the pavement. Then he pointed toward the street. Leave. Why? Because I don't want to hurt you. That sentence went straight up the Veyr command network in real time. Sira froze at her station. Vale heard it and said nothing at all. On the ground, the alien commander backed away slowly, and the warden did not follow. That machine had every advantage, Sira said. Why did it let them go? Vale watched the recording twice before answering. Because it is not a military unit. Then what is it? A police machine? He turned back to the display. Ignore it. Commander, it just defeated an entire squad. It did not pursue them. That may be because it didn't want to. Then it is constrained by its own rules, Vale said, and the doctrine had found itself a comfortable explanation to file the whole incident under. Police enforced laws. Police did not conquer planets. Police, by the tidy logic of 600 years of successful campaigns, were therefore predictable, bound, and safe to disregard. It was a clean explanation. It was also completely wrong, and it would take him most of the rest of the day to find that out. At 8:20, the Dominion turned its attention to Calder's hospitals, and true to doctrine, they didn't bother attacking the buildings directly. They simply cut the central power distribution feeding them. On the sound and reasonable theory that hospitals depend on power, power depends on the grid, and controlling the grid therefore controls the hospitals. What the theory failed to account for was that Calder's hospitals had emergency generators. The generators had fuel reserves. The fuel reserves had drivers on call to top them off. The drivers had families. The families had neighbors, and the neighbors, it turned out, had pickup trucks and absolutely no hesitation about using them. Inside 20 minutes, fuel was already moving from private storage sites across the city toward every hospital that needed it. Veyr surveillance logged 37 separate, uncoordinated transport movements, converging on the same handful of targets. And Sira stared at the pattern for a long moment before she understood what she was actually seeing. How did they coordinate that? There must be a hidden command network, Vale said. We haven't found one. Then keep searching. She zoomed in instead and found phone calls, text messages, people shouting across fences and parking lots, a hospital administrator asking a neighbor for a favor, a mechanic loading jerrycans into his truck bed without being asked twice, a restaurant sending trays of food to a nursing staff that hadn't eaten since the ships arrived, a school unlocking its doors and turning its gymnasium into a place for people who had nowhere else to go. Nobody was issuing orders. Everyone was simply answering. Whatever need was standing closest in front of them. There is no system, Sira said quietly. Every system has a structure. Maybe humans don't have one. Maybe they never needed one. For the first time all day, Vale did not immediately answer her. At 8:43, the warden's radio crackled with a citywide emergency request, not from any police channel, but from an electrical inspector named Mara Pell, who he'd worked 3 floods and 1 refinery fire with over the years. Wardens. Yes. We've got trouble near the river. What kind? Alien machines, a lot of them. Are you safe? Mostly. Where are you? North Drainage Station. He was already moving. Stay there. She laughed a little breathless. That's not really an option right now. I will arrive in 11 minutes. Make it 10. I will arrive in 9. Show off, Mara said, and cut the channel, and he headed for the river. Calder's drainage valley sat well below street level, a network of old channels built to carry stormwater under the city before it reached the river. And the tunnels down there were older than most of the people who worked them, patched 100 different ways over 100 different years. The sort of infrastructure a city keeps meaning to replace and never quite gets around to. Calder's own maintenance crews had a decent working memory of the whole system. The Dominion had absolutely none. At 8:51, a Veyr armored vehicle rolled into the valley, its sensors reading a clean, unobstructed route, and the ground simply gave way under its front wheels. The vehicle didn't brake. It just stopped, half swallowed by a channel that hadn't shown up on any survey the fleet had run. Reverse, the commander inside shouted, and the vehicle reversed straight into a second channel, and now it was stuck in 2 directions at once. A maintenance worker leaning against the guardrail nearby watched the whole thing with the mild interest of a man who had seen worse happen to city trucks on a Tuesday. "You're going to want the west route," he offered. The alien climbed out. "Why?" "That one's deeper." "How do you know that?" "I work here." "Who commands you?" The worker shrugged. "Nobody, really." "You're blocking the drain," the worker added, before the alien could ask anything else. "Move," the commander said. "Can't, your tank's in the way." The alien looked at the tank, then at the worker, then back at the drain, and understood something for the first time that morning that no scan had told him. He wasn't going to have to defeat these people to lose. He only had to let them keep doing ordinary things around him for long enough. The vehicle was recovered without injury on either side, but the delay cost the Dominion's advance 23 full minutes. Mistake number 4. At 9:04, the fleet changed tactics entirely. Veyr ordered a controlled orbital blackout, 90 seconds with every major communications satellite above Calder switched off at once, expecting the city to reveal its hidden nerve center the moment the lights went out. The city went quiet. Then slowly it started lighting back up, one neighborhood at a time, then another, then a third. People had radios, battery lanterns, portable generators, old wired telephones nobody had thrown out, vehicle comm systems, construction equipment running its own short-range channels, hospital backup networks, a farm radio somebody's grandfather had never gotten rid of. The blackout had stripped away exactly one layer of the city's communication, the central one, and left every other layer completely untouched, because it turned out there had never really been just one layer to begin with. "The city doesn't have a central nervous system," Sira said. Veyr's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the console. "It has millions of small ones." "Yes, that's not possible." "It's not efficient," she said. "That's different from impossible." He watched the lights climb back across the valley, and for the first time since the campaign began, his doctrine offered him nothing to say back. The warden reached the drainage station at 8:52, 9 minutes flat, and found Mara covered in dust beside a control panel. "You actually timed yourself." "Yes. That's a little weird. I am a police machine." "Fair enough," she pointed toward the river. "They're trying to reach the pumping station. If they take it, they can flood the lower industrial district on purpose. That would endanger civilians. That's the general idea from their side." He looked at the panel. "What's the pressure rating on that gate?" She gave him the number. "How long can it hold?" 6 minutes, maybe." "Then we have 6 minutes." "No, we don't," Mara said. 3, that gauge is wrong. Nobody replaced it after the last flood." He absorbed it the way he absorbed most bad news without slowing down. "Then let's do this properly." The aliens reached the pumping station at 9:16, expecting to find machinery, and instead finding the warden standing directly in front of the controls. "You," the commander said. "Yes." "You are obstructing Dominion forces." "Correct." "You cannot defeat us." "I don't need to." "We will activate this station." "No." "You will be destroyed." "No," the warden's voice never rose. "I understand, people. That's the part you're missing." The commander ordered his soldiers forward anyway, and the fight that followed was short and almost entirely defensive, the warden using doors, railings, catwalks, and the tight, ugly geometry of the pumping station the way a man uses a hallway to end a bar fight without breaking anything expensive. He pushed, he blocked, he redirected. One soldier slipped on wet grating. A second got briefly trapped behind a maintenance gate that the warden had simply swung shut at the right moment. A third had his weapon knocked clean into a water channel and spent a full minute trying to fish it back out with a boot hook. Within 90 seconds, the commander found himself standing alone between a control panel and a machine that had never once tried to seriously hurt him. "Stand down," the warden said. The alien raised his weapon, held it there, and slowly lowered it again. "Why?" "Because you're not the problem." "Then what is?" The warden pointed toward the rest of the city, lights already climbing back on across the valley behind him. "You don't know what you're actually fighting." That transmission reached the flagship in full, and for a long moment nobody on the bridge said anything at all. At 9:27, Veyr finally asked the question he should have asked. 3 hours earlier, what is that machine's actual objective? Sira pulled the file. Public safety. Define it. Prevent injury, protect civilians, maintain local order. Whose order? Local law. Then why is it fighting us? Because it considers us dangerous. Then it's a military unit. No, Commander, because it isn't trying to win. It's trying to make sure everyone survives. Silence sat on the bridge for a long moment, and then Veyr did something none of his officers had ever heard him do mid-campaign. He gave an order to pull back. "Withdraw from Calder's residential zones," he said. Sira turned. "That's a retreat." "It is a tactical redistribution." "Commander, do not use that word." She entered the order anyway, and for about 3 minutes it actually worked, the squads pulling back in good order through quiet streets. Then the civilians started following them. Not attacking, following. A woman walked half a block behind a retreating squad with a clipboard tucked under one arm, and when the commander finally stopped, mostly out of confusion, she caught up and held out a form. "Excuse me, you need to sign this." "Why?" "Property damage." She pointed at a broken streetlight. "We did not damage that." "You did." "I will not sign it." "Then I need your identification number for the file." He looked at the streetlight, then at her, then at the 6 soldiers waiting behind him, and closed his eyes for a moment before holding out his hand for the form. He signed it. She thanked him politely and walked away. Sira watched the footage back on the bridge and had to actively suppress a smile. Veyr did not. At 9:41, the fleet tried one final large-scale maneuver, cutting Calder into 4 isolated zones at once. No orbital communications, no external power, no transportation between districts, no shared access to the river or the city center. Doctrine predicted the isolated zones would collapse without central support. Instead, they simply adapted, each one on its own terms. The Northern District put bicycle couriers on the street inside 20 minutes. The Eastern District ran messages through hospital radios. The Industrial District used its own internal factory lines. The Southern District, with a shrug that history would later find genuinely funny, pressed a fleet of school buses into service as makeshift transport and supply runs. There was no central switch left to flip, because there had never really been just one. At 9:48, Veyr ordered the final strike. Sira stood up from her station. "Commander, you already know this won't work." "I know." "Then why order it?" He looked at the city on the display for a long moment. "Because if I stop now, I have to admit the doctrine was wrong." She had nothing to say to that, and he turned away from her toward the weapons officer. "Prepare the fleet." On the ground, the warden detected the energy buildup the moment it started. "Can you stop that?" Mara asked. "No." "Can anyone?" He checked every channel available to him. "Possibly." He opened the citywide emergency broadcast and let his voice go out over every radio, every screen, every intercom still working in Calder. "Citizens of Calder, I need your assistance. The Dominion is preparing an orbital strike, and we cannot stop the weapon directly." A mechanic looked up from his workbench. A nurse froze in a hospital corridor. A bus driver pulled over and put the vehicle in park. "We can make the target impossible for them to identify," the warden said, and then the whole city simply began to move. Every light in Calder came on at once. Factories fired their emergency systems. Cars pulled out onto open streets. Hospitals lit every external floodlight they had. Construction crews started their equipment. Warehouse doors rolled open. Fire stations ran their sirens end to end. Within minutes, the city below had turned itself into a single sprawling field of heat, noise, and electromagnetic clutter. And the Veyr targeting systems, built for finding a single command center in a quiet city, found nothing but a place refusing, all at once, to be reduced to one target. "Commander, the targeting system can't isolate a resistance center," Sira said. "Use pattern analysis." "There's no pattern." "Population density, then." "Too many variables." "Industrial concentration." "Too many." "Power output." "Too many, Commander. There's nothing left to aim at. That isn't just the whole city." Veyr said nothing for a long moment, staring at the display, and then slowly raised one hand. "Cancel the strike." The weapons officer hesitated. "We have not achieved the objective." "Correct. Then why?" "Because the objective is no longer achievable without casualties. I am not prepared to explain to the Council." He turned to Sira. "Human casualties." "Minimals." "Ours." "Minimals." "Keep it that way," Veyr said, and the fleet pulled back off firing position. The warden received the transmission a moment later. "Dominion Commander requests C." "Communication." "Connect," he said, and Veyl's voice came through clear on the emergency channel. "Machine." "Commander." "You have defeated my forces." "No." "You have." "We are still here," the warden said. "That is not the same thing." There was a pause. "Why did you not destroy my soldiers when you had the chance?" "Because they stopped attacking." "You could have killed them." "Yes." "But you didn't." "No." "Why?" The warden's answer came with the same flat calm he'd used on a delivery driver at 6:40 that morning. "That isn't how we do this here." It was a small sentence, almost nothing. But it was the first thing all day that Veyl's doctrine had no bin to file it under because humanity hadn't beaten him with a weapon. It had simply outlasted every assumption he'd walked in with. "How many campaigns have I commanded?" he asked Sira without turning around. 43. "How many ended in victory?" 43. He looked back at the feed of the city below, lit up like a field of stars that had decided to fight back with electricity instead of anything sharper. "And this one." "Now you can leave," the warden said. Veyr almost laughed, not because any of it was funny, but because after 43 unbroken victories, the simplest possible answer had somehow become the hardest one he'd ever had to give. He could order another strike. He could bombard Calder outright. He could kill thousands, maybe eventually millions, and break this planet the way he'd broken 43 others before it. But he would have to throw out the doctrine that had carried him his entire career to do it, and admit that victory here meant destroying something that had never had a single point to aim at in the first place. And there was a second problem sitting underneath the first one, quieter but heavier. He had watched his own soldiers lower their weapons because they were simply tired of fighting people who kept helping each other instead of running. He had watched strangers hand each other fuel, food, radios, doors. He had watched a woman argue a soldier into signing a damage report in the middle of an active invasion. He had watched a police machine take a weapon out of a man's hands and hand it right back to him, unbroken. Veyr pulled off his command glove, a small motion nobody else on the bridge quite registered as significant. "Withdraw the fleet." Sira didn't move at first. "All forces." "All of them." "From Earth entirely." From Earth, she entered the order, and across the flagship officers watched their screens authenticated in silence, and the Veyr fleet began climbing back out of orbit. 3 hours after the first ship crossed into Earth's atmosphere, the invasion was over. There had been no citywide battle, no exchange of nuclear weapons, no burning capital, no mass grave for the history books to point at. Calder counted 7 minor human injuries. The Dominion counted 11 injured soldiers. Nobody on either side had died, and that turned out to be the detail people remembered longest. Earth had won, and almost nobody threw a parade for it, because the whole point had been the parade that never had to happen. The warden was back at the municipal station by 10:12. Mara was waiting for him on the steps. "You know," she said, "you could probably ask for a raise after today." "I am not employed by the city." "Exactly my point." He checked the street. The same delivery truck from that morning was parked illegally again, 2 blocks down. He started walking toward it, and Mara fell in beside him, laughing before he'd even said anything. "You're actually going to deal with that, right now?" "Yes." "The planet was just invaded." "Yes." "And you're writing a parking ticket." "Correct." The driver saw him coming and groaned before either of them said a word. "Oh, come on. Your vehicle is blocking emergency access." "I thought the invasion changed the rules." "It did not." The driver sighed and paid the fine without further argument, muttering something about impossible robots the whole time, and the warden walked back toward the station with Mara still laughing behind him. "Let's do this properly," he said, mostly to himself, and went back to work. Far above Earth, the Veyr fleet moved back through open space, and Sira stood beside Vale as he read through the final campaign report. He stopped at one line and read it twice. "How many independent human response actions did we log?" "Approximately 86,000. "In 3 hours?" "Yes, Commander." He set the report down. "Did we ever locate their central command?" "No." "Their supreme commander?" "No." "Who gave the order to light the whole city at once?" "We don't know, Commander. We genuinely don't know." He looked out at Earth through the observation window, already shrinking behind them. "Then we misunderstood the species entirely." "They are a civilization," Sira said. "No, we believed they were a civilization built around a structure, the way every world we've ever taken has been. They are something else. A collection of people who simply keep helping each other, whether anyone tells them to or not." "Isn't that the same thing?" Vale considered the question longer than she expected. "Perhaps," he said finally, and closed the file. Years later, Veyr military academies taught the Calder incident to every new cadet, though never officially as a defeat, because the Dominion did not use that word in its own textbooks. They called it a doctrinal failure instead, and taught that organized resistance was not the only form resistance could take, that a civilization could be resilient without any single command structure holding it together, and that a decentralized society could absorb an attack designed to dismantle centralized systems and simply shrug it off, because there had never been a center to dismantle in the first place. Most importantly, cadets learned the line Vale himself eventually added to Dominion doctrine, the one every serious officer since has had to recite before their first command. Never assume the absence of a system means the absence of strength. Nobody in Calder made nearly that big a deal about it. The streetlights got fixed, the hospital generators got refueled properly, and the gauges finally replaced. The drainage station got a long overdue inspection. The permit officer filed 32 separate incident reports and, by her own account, enjoyed every one of them. The firefighters went back to their regular shifts. The delivery drivers went back to complaining about traffic, and the warden went back to his patrols. The next morning at exactly 6:40, he stood in his usual spot beside the same street barrier while the sun came up over the valley and the river ran quiet behind the factories. A delivery truck rolled up and stopped early, well clear of the line this time. The driver rolled down his window. "Morning." "Good morning. You're not going to tell me I'm blocking the emergency lane, are you?" The warden checked the road. "Clear." "No." The driver smiled and started to pull away, and the warden let him get about 10 feet before speaking again. "Your left brake light is not functioning." The driver groaned and pulled back over, and the warden walked toward him at the same unhurried pace he always used, while the rest of Calder kept waking up behind them exactly like it did every other morning. Nothing exploded. No fleet returned. Nobody surrendered because nobody ever really had to. Sometimes the thing that saves a planet isn't the weapon built to fight for it. It's the ordinary person, or machine, or nurse, or mechanic, or driver, or neighbor, who simply refuses to stop doing the right thing once everything gets difficult. The Dominion came looking for Earth's strongest system. They never realized, until it was already too late to matter, that the system had been everyone the whole time. If you were in Calder that morning, what ordinary skill or machine would you have trusted when everything else failed? Tell me in the comments, and thank you for staying with me through this one.